the average person, they are interacting constantly with people. And the average case, they don't want the person to remember anything because they don't want to interfere with your normal life. They want you to continue on your life because they are really the observers and the watchers. And they're just watching us make fools of ourselves. They've been doing it since the beginning of the world. But so they're not want to interfere. They want you to go on with your life. So if you do have an experience, they don't want you to remember it. But they said they have no control over the way the chemistry of the brain is working now. The pollutants in the air, the additives to the food, if you are on any kind of alcohol, if you're taking any kind of drugs, recreational or medicinal, all of these interfere with the chemistry of the brain. So if the person has an experience, they will remember it distorted through the chemistry of the brain. And they will remember it with the fear and horror that really is not there. Because this is the way the human mind works. And it's remembering it through these chemical imbalances that are happening in our brain. So that's why I found a way to bypass all of that and get to the real part of the mind that has the memory. And I have worked with other cases that other investigators have done. Bud Hopkins was a friend of mine, but he was terrified of this work. And he really thought everything was evil and bad and all of that. But he was terrified of going into the somnambulistic level, too. He said, no, I'm never going to go there. He said, what I'm finding is bad enough. I don't want to find more. So then he thought it would all be worse. Anyway, I had worked with cases that he did. And when I did the case, we found a totally different story. And the person afterwards would say, well, if that's what happened, I can live with that. Because some of these people were afraid to even go out their front door. Because they multiplied and focused on the fear and the emotion. Now that's the human part. But I found a way to get around that, especially when we got them on board the craft, to where they wouldn't react in that way and you could get the true story. That's the difference in what I have found and what the other investigators are finding. They keep them in the light level. So I began my work with the past life regression, and that's why I've got so much result with my books. I've written 17 books. People come up to me and said, I read all your books. I said, oh, 17? I didn't know there were 17. They're thinking the Convoluted Universe books are my only ones. Those are the latest ones that I've done. But I started writing the books in the 1980s. It took me 9 years to get my first book published because I had to wait for the rest of the world to catch up with me. It was all, what do you mean reincarnation, past lives? They had known what this was about. So it took me a long time, and then even when I got in there, we ran up against these skeptics and saying, I don't believe in what you're writing about. So I was mostly involved with the past life regressions, and I had 5 books out by the time Lou Parrish came into my life. You know, Lou Parrish is the one who started this whole thing. He's a wonderful, wonderful person. And he began talking to me about the UFO phenomenon. Well, I always believed there were UFOs, but I was not into that type of investigation. And he took me to meetings. And there's MUFON meetings, there were different meetings where the investigators were meeting and discussing all these cases. And I just kind of sat in the court and listened because I didn't know anything about the cases and the background and mechanics of the UFO phenomenon. So he got me interested. And one time he even brought me the book from the Whitley Strieber's Communion. Had come out and he said, you need to read this book. This shows what they're doing with hypnosis. And so one time he said, you know, we're having people that think they've been abducted, But there's nobody in Arkansas who can do this kind of work. He said a lot of them, psychologists had tried hypnosis on them, and they'd get them into the scene, they would be on board the craft, and then suddenly the psychologist would just wake them up. And they'd say, we don't know what to ask, we don't know how to handle this because it's not in the book. So that is not good therapy. That's worse therapy than not having any at all, if you just jerk somebody out of a traumatic situation. So Luke called me and he said, we gotta have somebody who can work with these people. And he said, you've been involved in the bazaar for so long, we don't think it'll frighten you. I said, it won't frighten me, it just makes me curious. I just want to know more.